How's everybody doing this morning? Wow, that was a little bit weak there. Come on. You know what an example of a healthy church has a whole lot of men in the crowd and the congregation who sing during praise and worship. That's how you know you have a healthy family. And I have watched over the years as this is going to be in people's way. I've watched over the years this church, and one of the things that I love about the Ridge is that we have a bunch of men who praise and worship God freely and openly in the midst of service. I hope that that takes place in their families. Some of you know me. My name is Sean Pennington. I'm actually not one of the pastors here at the Ridge. I know Bobby and Wes usually get up and tell you guys that they're one of the pastors, but I'm not. I am a small business owner here in Oak Ridge. And funny enough, I did not go to church or go to college for business. I got my minor in business. I actually went to college for youth ministry, and I got my master's degree in youth and family ministry. I have an 86-page thesis to go along with that. And trust me, that, if nothing else, proves that I've got a master's degree. I've probably held every pastoral role that you can possibly think of, from being a lead pastor of a church plant to youth, children's, even first impressions. And I've had a number of my theories proven to myself over the course of the many years. One of those top theories is the debate over nurture versus nature. Now, some people would say that your DNA makes up who you will become. Nurture is the other side of that coin. I believe it's a little bit of both. You start off with a certain set of instructions in your DNA, but who you become ultimately is based off of what you learn throughout life. People change. And so in the mindset of learning today, I am going to teach you something that will break some of your realities. And I encourage you that if you're not ready for your reality to be broken today, there are 3 doors back there. I suggest you use at least one of them and see yourself out. I'll give you about 10 seconds to make a run for it. Today I'll drop a knowledge bomb, and that's about as hip as I get. Ask my kids. James Dobson has a line that I've remembered since he said it probably 30 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that. He talks about raising boys. Now, girls are a different story. Boys are very interesting. And if you've got boys or have had boys or you have been a boy, you know that you tend to get in a little bit of trouble. An interesting thing is James Dobson said, he gave you an example of a couple of boys, and one of the boys hits the other boy. His dad brings him out, and he goes, "Why did you do that?" If anybody's ever watched Bill Cosby as himself, I'm giving away my age a little bit here, his son's response is, "I don't know. Why did you do that? I don't know." The reality is the boys probably didn't know. At some point in time in life, we as human beings figure out that there's a connection path. This happened, therefore this happened, therefore this happened, therefore this happened, right? Cause and effect. But boys, they only know a fuzzy thing of where it started here. I was out in the snow, and I'm in trouble for hitting my brother. The cause and effect between those two things never took place. They're clueless. And so, in reality, they really didn't know. Now, that will make more sense as we continue. But Matthew 22, 37 through 40 in the Message, Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. This is the most important, the first on any list. But there is a second set alongside it. Love others as well as you love yourself. These 2 commands are pegs. Everything in God's law and the prophets hangs on them." Now, to continue on, we have to understand what the law is, what its purpose is, and who it was written for. And so the law, in the Old Testament, the laws of God as determined by the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, this is important, okay? Determined by the chief priests based off the Ten Commandments. Jesus did away with the law at his death. But the law back in the Old Testament is what the chief priests used to trap people. Particularly, they tried to use the law to trap Jesus. Now, we can see why we needed to do away with the law. We as human beings tried to use God's law to justify killing God's Son. See the reason why we need to get rid of it? So this is what God did. Now, what's the purpose of the law? It was to show people the need of the Savior, to function as a restraint in society and to direct the believer in his behavior. Notice it really didn't apply to the Gentiles. It was originally for the Jews and no one else. Moving on, Romans 2:12 through 16. The gist of this is you have no excuse. If you didn't know what God's law is, it's not an excuse. Because as we grow up, we begin to learn what is right, what is wrong. The interesting thing is God puts that in us from the get-go. Yes, we're born into a sinful nature, but we know right from wrong. Those boys know it's not right to hit your brother. That's not something we should have to teach, but that is the reality, is that we have to reinforce that, right? And so Romans 12:2, all who sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law. All who sin under the law will be judged by the law. Now, this is to say, God is not partial. He loves everyone. And he will also hold everyone accountable for their entire life. No one gets a free pass. Now, kids, show of hands. I want to involve the kids in this, okay? Yep, raise your hands. How many of you think you've gotten away with something and your parents have no idea? Kids, my oldest son thought that. My little brother, who is probably going to be watching this later, so I'm going to rat him out. And we were joking about this the last time I was visiting my family. So my oldest thought that he'd gotten away with stuff. And I started naming stuff one day because he didn't realize that we knew what he'd gotten away with. And he was just sitting there, his eyes got like this big. He was just like, what? So about, I don't know, it's probably been about 7 years. My little brother, he is 17, 18 years old, I think. Maybe 16. He's got this nice Jeep, and he drives it through a puddle. Now, there's water in the engine from driving through this puddle. His buddy and a couple of the girls that they were hanging out with thought that this would be a good idea to drive through a puddle of water that was so small that there's no possible way that water could have gotten into the engine and destroyed it. And so he hung on to this story. And my parents are like, yeah, he drove through a puddle. And so I broke the news to him last year. Now, he is 25 years old now, if I'm not mistaken. And he looks at me, he goes, what? Really? They knew about that? I was like, of course they did. It's not a puddle. You don't drive through a puddle and get water in your air filter and get it sucked up into the engine. You drove through a small lake. He couldn't believe it. Everybody will get judged at some point, whether your parents know about it or not. Kids, thank you for taking part with us. All right. So, moving on to another story. Years ago, I had to go to court. I am a convicted, not felon. I know you all were thinking that. So years ago, I had to go to court. And it was for something really silly, really dumb. I got caught speeding. Raise of hands, parents, who's gotten caught speeding? Yeah, you guys can't judge me now. Okay, so so this is when the internet was first getting to be kind of a little bit bigger of a deal, and they put traffic school online. This was great because I was in college. I didn't have time to drive and go to this other silly class that I'd probably been to at least 3 times before. So I did it online. I finished it like a week beforehand. I was doing good. They have to send me a certificate so I can drive it up to the courthouse. I received the certificate the day after I was supposed to take it to the courthouse. My license got suspended. You're not allowed to drive. Okay. I'm in college. How often do I really have to drive? So a couple of buddies and I were driving across to the other coast of Florida to go to his house, and he gets pulled over for speeding. He got pulled over for speeding, not this guy. I know, for once I'm innocent. I have my suspended license on me, thinking that I need to have some type of government ID that's valid to show to whoever, just for whatever reason. Turns out, and I didn't know this at the time, that it's illegal to have a suspended license in your possession. You have to take it to the DMV and turn it in, which would require doing what? Driving. The one thing that you're not allowed to do with a suspended license. I love how red tape in the government works. It kind of traps you into your own scenario of you can't win, and they get to fine you, which is even better. So he gets pulled over. This officer decides that he wants to search the vehicle and have everybody get out of the vehicle. He wants everybody's licenses. Cool. Here you go, officer. Just to let you know, it is suspended. Great. He writes me a court date. Because I had a little piece of plastic about this big in my wallet. Just because I did not know that it was illegal to have a suspended license in your possession, even though it was mine and I wasn't driving, did not stop the judge from writing me a nice fine and having me drive all the way from West Palm Beach, Florida to Naples, Florida to have the judge give me a fine. It is what it is, right? And I got a second-degree misdemeanor for something really, really silly. But God's not partial. Neither was this judge. Romans 2:13. This is for those of you who believe you're Christians. I say that because there's a lot of people out there that think that they're Christians, but don't really act like it the other 6 days of the week. For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Just because you go to church doesn't mean you're a believer. Just because you pray on Sunday doesn't mean you're a believer. Being a believer, you have to live out your faith every day. That's a hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do, especially when you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people who are not acting out their faith every day. Or by a whole bunch of people who aren't believers. It's exceptionally hard to hold strong to your faith, to not give in to the jokes that are out there, or the statements that are made. or the words that aren't really considered to be okay. Romans 2:14 and 15 applies to those who don't believe. Now, fair warning, I gave you all a chance to run. And not a single one of you opened up that door and ran. So, indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. That's kind of complicated. That's a lot of words, right? I'm going to bring it down to about 8 words here. Maybe 10. If you know better, you are required to do better. God put it in us from the get-go of what is right and what is wrong. Now, teenagers. How many teenagers have we got in the room? Show of hands. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, thank you all for actually making the trek up here and being here early. I appreciate you all. Teenagers sometimes get put into difficult situations where they go, I don't know what is right. I don't want to let my buddy down. It would be bad to let my friend down, right? But on the other hand, if I don't do what my friend is doing because they're doing something wrong, then that's a good thing too, right? Rock, hard place, teenager in the middle. And we can come up with reasons and excuses why one thing is better than the other. But the reality is if we think about it, we know what the right decision is. It's the other influences that we're taking and considering. And I used to tell the kids in my youth groups this. Think before you do something, because one mistake can have massive consequences on the rest of your life. I know of people who have made choices and they spend the next 10 years trying to get to where they could have been had they not made one simple mistake. This happens to adults too. You teenagers, you're not alone. But teenagers, you're at such a great age that can change the trajectory of your life. Even 4-year-olds can have it change the trajectory of their life. It may only last them a day or a week, but teenagers, you will be held accountable. And quite possibly, like me, by a judge for doing one dumb thing. You fast forward a few years, and on job applications, this is not the reason why I own my own company, but on job applications, you have to write whether or not you've ever been convicted of something. My court case went something like this. What are you here for? Well, I had a suspended license, but it says that I had a fake ID, and that's not the same thing. My aunt was a lawyer. She was not down in Florida to defend me. And so I ended up with a second-degree misdemeanor. Now, when I fill out a job application, unless it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony, I have to write, yes, I have a second-degree misdemeanor. But the first time I applied for a job after that, I had no idea that I had been convicted of anything. He just hit the gavel and said court costs. I was like, cool, I got out of this. That was great. I had to do a deep dive to find out what had happened. Apparently, I pled no contest, even though I said I don't know what to plead. And now, if I was to fill out an application, I have to put, yes, I have a second-degree misdemeanor for something that is obscenely silly. But I've got one. Now, getting to what everybody's been wondering is, why do I have a target and a few arrows up here? What does this have to do with anything with Jesus? Did Jesus go hunting? Maybe. Doesn't say he did. This applies to sin. Now, some people know what sin is. It's doing the wrong thing, right? Whether it's for the right reason. Sin is actually an archery term. And it is the measure of how far you missed the mark. Here, I hit the mark. Here, got pretty close. Didn't quite hit it. And up here, I really had no idea where the target was, did I? Sin is the measure of missing the mark. And in verse 14, we see that. Missing the mark is an interesting thing. You can miss it by a small span or by a large span. And so, I got a story about my boys. I've got a story about myself. I went to school one day, and I was cussing. I was probably about 6 or 8 years old. And teacher wrote me up, called my mom. My mom said, if you do it again, I'm washing your mouth out with a bar of soap. I'm a boy. That threat didn't work. And the next day I went to school, and I was cussing again. And I came home. My mom had a bar of Irish Spring. It wasn't just put it in my mouth. I had to put it in my mouth, take a bite, and chew. You ever get something stuck in your teeth and you're just like, I can't get it out? Yeah, a bar of soap stuck in your teeth, it's really frustrating. But what's even worse is the chemical burns on your tongue. For those who don't know, they use lye in bar soap. Lye is the same thing that you can stick down the drain to clear your drains. It's a very nasty, acidic chemical. I don't think my mom realized it was in there because I was sitting and go, it burns, it's bubbling. As I have soap bubbles coming out of my mouth. My mom had to turn away because she was laughing. Thanks, Mom. I did not learn my lesson. Sometimes natural consequences are the best consequences. And that's where I talked about my boys here. So a few years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I come in from my office. I've got a home office. And I go downstairs, and the boys are sitting there looking at this computer box on the floor. Now, I own an IT company, so my boys working on a computer should probably not be that big of a surprise for anybody. But they're sitting there, and they look like they're just doing great. They're talking. My oldest is explaining to my youngest what does what and this and that. And they're getting ready to put parts in this computer. And so I walk away. I go back to my office. I come back a little bit later. And I walk in the downstairs, and I see this. Both of them are sitting crisscross applesauce in front of this box again. But both of them have their shoulders going up and down, and they are sniffling. As though they had both been crying, and in fact, they both had been. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, what on earth happened? They're in the same exact place, but they're both crying. Like, did they touch this thing with it plugged in and zap themselves? It turns out that one of them had pushed or punched the other, and the other responded by kicking the other in the head. Now, as a good parent, I thought it wise to discipline them. And so after I got the entire story, I said, I think you all have learned your lesson. There's nothing more for me to do here. And I walked upstairs. Because the fight was over. They were both crying. They were both hurt. I didn't feel that it was necessary to add insult to injury. They both sinned, and they both missed the mark. And they both found the result of that sin. Now, when you miss the mark, that's difficult, right? So the question becomes, how do I not miss the mark? How do I hit that bullseye every time I release my arrow? I'm going to give you a starting point. How many have heard of the essence of destiny? Pastor Bobby hadn't either. I love this. I made this for my brother when he finished his master's degree. And the essence of destiny goes like this. Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Choose your words, for they become your actions. Understand your actions, for they become your habits. Study your habits, for they become your character. Develop your character, for it becomes your destiny. What you think becomes habit. What you think teaches yourself. If you think it long enough and often enough, you can think the world is against you. If you think it long enough and often enough, everybody in the world loves you. True story. You can convince yourself of anything if you watch your thoughts and develop your character through them. And so, what does that mean for us when we're looking at missing the mark? It means it starts with our thoughts. Our thoughts can betray us to doing stupid things. Romans 2:16, as we move on. This will take place on the day when God judges people's secrets through Jesus Christ, as my gospel declares. This is a guarantee. You will be judged. Either by God's conditions, by yours. As believers, our judgment is already settled as innocent. We go to heaven. We messed up, but Jesus sacrificed himself for us. But there's a requirement there. And oftentimes people don't seem to grasp this. So listen closely. Just because you say you believe, just because you said, Jesus, I believe in you, that's not what determines that you are a Christian. That is a starting point. And every single day, every single second afterwards is your responsibility to live out that faith. You can't say, I believe today, and go kill somebody tomorrow. You probably didn't believe. Because belief is an ongoing process. As non-believers, it's based on what we do with what we know. But ultimately, and I gave you all a chance to run, if you're not a believer, it's only a judgment of what eternal punishment looks like for you. The degree of eternal punishment. I am not a hellfire and brimstone speaker. This isn't what I do. I like the upbeat stuff, really. If I could stay up here and dance the jig all service, I would. But it's the degree to eternal punishment. So here are the three takeaways. I've bored you all for long enough. Going to church is not Willy Wonka's golden ticket to heaven. Sorry, just because you're here does not mean we give you a golden ticket and you go, and when you die, you instantly go to heaven. It's not like that. As a non-believer, you'll be judged based on the good God put in you. You know what is right and you know what is wrong. And you have to live it out. And if you have the knowledge of Jesus, you have no excuse of not following every day. Jesus is your golden ticket. But once you have that golden ticket, it comes with two strings attached. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength. And maybe harder than that is love others as yourself. Putting others first is going to be a tough thing for some of us, especially in the I age. The iPhone, the iPod, the iPad. Gotta love Apple. Acts 14:21 and 22. And I'm almost done, y'all, so if you're sitting there going, I'm almost asleep, shut up, Sean. I'm almost done. They preached the good news in that city and won a large number of disciples. Then they returned, strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith. I've ruined every non-believer's life today, because I've left you with very few options. Taking away any excuse you had. And normally this is where people would say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, bless your heart. But I'm not sorry. Not sorry. Number one, I gave you the option to run. At any point in time in the service, you could have ran. But you didn't. As Pastors Bobby and Wes will say, you're here for a reason. You came to this church on this day for a reason. There's good news, though. Life cannot be done without a community. And we as believers need to live together in community with one another. Going to church, Bible studies, coffee hangouts, ball games. I know there's one coming up. Or whatever it is, we need to do life together. To build each other up, to walk with each other. Just as the disciples did. Now, again, I'm finishing up. I hope that at this point in time you understand we need each other. We need to watch our thoughts, because eventually that becomes our destiny. And if you're not a believer, or if you think that you've been a believer, but now you're suddenly going, well, maybe I haven't been. Myself, Pastors Bobby and Pastors Wes, we are here. We're happy to talk with you. We're happy to walk you through what this looks like and connect you with others to walk and do life with you. So, if any of that resounds with you, if it connects with you in any way, find one of us after service. In the meantime, the band's going to come up. I'm going to pray. And I'm sure there's some announcements to go along with everything. But I'm done boring you. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for everyone in this room. I ask that you touch our hearts, our minds, and help us to live out our faith every day. For those of us who aren't believing, I pray that you continue to yank on our heartstrings and show us your face and your heart. Guide us and help us throughout this week and draw us closer to you. Amen.